September 3rd, 1868, Georgia State Capitol, Atlanta. Bishop Henry McNeal Turner stood before 200 white legislators in the grand hall candles flickering against mahogany walls. He was 34 years old, wearing his finest black suit, a Bible tucked under his left arm. These men had just voted to expel him, not for corruption, not for crime, for being black. 28 other black representatives sat in the gallery watching their colleague rise to speak. Outside, armed white men gathered muttering threats. Inside, white legislators laughed, confident they had crushed the brief moment when former slaves dared to govern themselves. They had no idea what was about to happen. Turner's voice cut through the noise like a prophet's sword. "Am I a man?" he asked them. "Do I have a soul to save?" The laughter died. His voice grew stronger. "You may expel us today, gentlemen, but mark my words. Before the great tribunal of heaven, you will answer for this crime." He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He prophesied their judgment. 27 years later, same man, different battleground. Turner now wore the robes of an AME bishop, standing in a packed church in Atlanta. He raised his hand and declared words that would send shockwaves across America. God is a Negro. White newspapers exploded with rage. They called him blasphemer extremist, dangerous radical. But Turner didn't stop. He published it in his newspaper, The Voice of Missions. "We would rather be atheists than believe in a white man's God." Then he said something even more shocking. "Leave America, return to Africa. This nation has betrayed you, and it will never change." The government began tracking him like a criminal. White America wanted him silenced. Black moderates called him too radical. But Turner kept preaching, kept writing, kept organizing ships to sail back to the motherland. For over 100 years, they erased Bishop Henry McNeal Turner from your textbooks. They called him crazy. They called him a troublemaker. They made sure your grandparents never learned his name. But he was right about everything. The betrayal he warned about became Jim Crow. The theft he exposed became the wealth gap. The prophecy he delivered became your reality. This is the story they buried. This is your stolen inheritance. And by the time this video ends, you will never see America the same way again. You are about to discover why the most powerful black bishop of the 19th century told his people to abandon America. You will learn how the United States government systematically destroyed Reconstruction and crushed black political power. You will see the names, the dates, the documents they kept hidden. You will understand why Turner declared God is black and why that terrified white supremacy to its core. More importantly, you will connect the dots from Turner's expulsion in 1868 to the wealth gap today, from the massacres they hid to the reparations they refuse, from the history they erased to the justice we demand right now. This is not ancient history. If your great-grandparents lived through Jim Crow, they lived through Turner's prophecy coming true. If you have ever been told to get over slavery, this video will arm you with the truth. Turner fought for you. He was silenced for you. And what he faced is exactly what you face today, just wearing different masks. After this video, you will understand why median black household wealth is $24,000, while median white household wealth is $188,000. You will understand why they owe us not as charity, but as debt. You will understand why reparations are not a gift, but repayment for theft. And you will never accept their excuses again. Let me tell you who Henry McNeal Turner really was. Born February 1st, 1834, in Newberry County, South Carolina. His father died when he was young. His mother was a free black woman, but freedom meant poverty, meant danger, meant watching every word. Young Henry grew up in a world where teaching a black child to read was illegal. But somebody taught him anyway. a white man who pitied him a few free black folks who risked jail to pass knowledge in secret. By the time Henry was 14 in 1848, he left home, worked the cotton fields, worked as a blacksmith, his hands scarred from hot iron and hammer strikes. Every dollar earned was survival, but his mind was hungry. He read everything he could find, taught himself law, theology, history. The knowledge white supremacy tried to keep from him, he stole back through sheer will. In 1853, 19 years old Henry McNeal Turner walked into an African Methodist Episcopal church in Baltimore. That moment changed everything. The AME church was not just religion, it was power, organization, education, resistance. Founded by Richard Allen in 1816 after white Methodists forced black worshippers into segregated pews, the AME church became a nation within a nation. And Turner found his calling. By 1860, he was ordained a deacon. 2 years later, an elder. He was young, brilliant, on fire with purpose. Then came the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln needed black men to fight. The Union Army created the United States Colored Troops. And in 1863, Turner became the first black chaplain in United States military history. Picture him in uniform, Bible in one hand, leading black soldiers who had been enslaved just months before. He trained them to fight the Confederacy. He preached to them about divine justice, about freedom earned through blood. He wrote in his journal about the moral weight of it all. It is no easy matter to stand against all the demoralizing influences in the field, but he stood, and those men fought, and the Union won. 1865, war over, slavery legally dead. Turner traveled to Georgia with the Freedmen's Bureau, the federal agency tasked with helping 4 million formerly enslaved people rebuild their lives. He didn't just help individuals, he built institutions. He planted AME churches across Georgia like seeds of liberation. Dozens of congregations, thousands of members, a network of black power rising from the ashes of slavery. But Turner had another vision: political power. In 1867, the radical Republicans in Congress passed Reconstruction Acts. For the first time in American history, black men could vote in the South, not because white Southerners wanted it, because federal troops enforced it at gunpoint, July 1867. Georgia held elections, and the impossible happened. 3 black senators elected, 29 black representatives elected to the Georgia Legislature. Henry McNeal Turner, among them, representing Macon. Imagine that moment. Men who had been enslaved 2 years earlier, now sitting in the state capitol, writing laws, debating policy, wielding power. White Georgia went insane. They could not accept it. Democrats, former Confederates, Ku Klux Klan members, they all schemed for one goal: get the Negroes out. September 3rd, 1868, the day that would define Turner's life. The Georgia Legislature convened. White Democrats held the majority. They called for a vote, not on policy, not on corruption charges, a vote to expel every single black legislator, all 29 of them. The reason Negroes are not eligible to hold office. That was it. No other charge, no other justification, just the color of their skin. The vote passed. White legislators cheered, pounded desks, celebrated like they had won a war. Turner rose to his feet. Every eye turned to him. Some expected him to beg for mercy. Some expected him to slink away quietly. They didn't know Henry McNeal Turner. His voice boomed across that chamber. Am I a man? Silence. Have I a soul to save? Not a sound. If I am such, I claim the rights of a man. He looked each legislator in the eye. You may expel us, gentlemen. You may steal this moment. But you are making a grave mistake. He told them their children would pay for this sin. He told them history would judge them. He told them God was watching and divine justice would not forget. You make us forever your political foes. Never, and I mean never will, a black man vote Democrat again after what you do today. And then the declaration that sent chills through that room. I will go through all the land and advise my race to beware of the Democratic Party. They expelled him anyway. All 29 black representatives thrown out of the Georgia Capitol. Federal troops did nothing. President Andrew Johnson, who had opposed Reconstruction from the start, did nothing. The Freedmen's Bureau could not help, and the Ku Klux Klan went to work. In the months that followed, Klan violence exploded across Georgia. They burned black churches, they murdered black leaders, they whipped black voters in the streets. Turner wrote letters pleading for federal intervention. They murdered our brothers, burned our churches, and made us fugitives in our own land. Washington did not answer. Turner watched Reconstruction collapse in slow motion. In 1877, the final blow came. The Compromise of 1877, a backroom deal where Republicans traded the presidency for the withdrawal of all federal troops from the South. The troops left. Jim Crow began, and black Southerners were abandoned to white terror. This was Turner's breaking point, not his spirit breaking, his illusions breaking. He had believed America could change. He had believed the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the promises of Reconstruction. Now he knew the truth. America will never give us justice. Late 1870s, Turner began preaching a message that scandalized black and white America alike. Leave. Go back to Africa. Build your own nation. Stop begging white people for crumbs. He became the loudest, most powerful voice of the Back to Africa movement. People thought he was crazy. Black intellectuals like Frederick Douglass opposed him, saying we earned our place here through blood and suffering. White segregationists mocked him, saying good riddance. But Turner didn't care. He had seen the future, and it was Jim Crow, lynching, sharecropping, slavery, stolen land, crushed dreams. In 1880, Turner was elected the 12th bishop of the AME Church, the first Southern bishop. He now controlled Arkansas, Mississippi, and Indian Territory. He used that platform like a megaphone. Every sermon, every church conference, every letter. The message: emigration to Liberia. In 1893, he founded a newspaper, The Voice of Missions. In 1901, another, The Voice of the People. Both papers preached the same gospel: return to Africa, build black nations, escape white terrorism, stop waiting for America to love you. It never will. Turner didn't just talk. In 1876, he was elected president of the American Colonization Society, and between 1895 and 1896, he organized 2 ships. Over 500 black emigrants sailed from southern ports to Liberia, families leaving everything behind, choosing African soil over American oppression. Turner himself traveled to Liberia multiple times to survey conditions and encourage settlement. Thousands more black families from Arkansas, Mississippi, and Georgia seriously considered following. For a moment, it seemed possible. A great exodus, a return to the motherland, freedom on their own terms. But the most explosive moment came in 1895. Turner was 61 years old, a bishop with international influence, a man whose words reached tens of thousands. He published a sermon in The Voice of Missions that made headlines across the country. God is a Negro. 3 words, a theological earthquake. Turner did not stutter. He wrote it clearly, boldly, defiantly. We have as much right biblically and otherwise to believe that God is a Negro as you white people have to believe that God is a fine-looking, symmetrical, and ornamented white man. Then he went further. We had rather be an atheist and believe in no God than to believe in the personality of a God and not believe that he is Negro. White newspapers lost their minds. The Observer called it blasphemous and dangerous. Ministers across the South condemned Turner from their pulpits. The white press labeled him an extremist, a heretic, a threat to Christian civilization. But Turner stood his ground. He explained his reasoning with devastating clarity. Every race sees God in their own image. White people made Jesus white to justify enslaving us. They used a white God to tell us we were cursed, inferior, designed for servitude. So we reclaim God as black to reclaim our dignity, our humanity, our divine worth. This was black liberation theology 70 years before James Cone would write about it. This was theological resistance, spiritual warfare against white supremacy's most powerful weapon, religion itself. Turner's Back to Africa movement ultimately failed in its immediate goal. Many emigrants returned from Liberia disappointed by harsh conditions, disease, and economic struggle. The American government refused to provide support and actively worked to discourage emigration. White newspapers continued to paint Turner as a dangerous lunatic. But Turner never stopped. He preached until his final breath. He also made history in another way. He became the first AME bishop to ordain a woman as deacon, a revolutionary act in the 1890s. His vision of liberation extended to gender as well as race. May 8, 1915. Turner died in Windsor, Canada, at 81 years old. His funeral drew thousands. But within a generation, his name began to fade. The AME church establishment, seeking respectability, distanced itself from his radical Back to Africa message. Textbooks ignored him. When they mentioned him at all, it was only as the first black chaplain, a footnote sanitized and safe. They erased his expulsion from the Georgia Legislature. They erased his God is a Negro sermon. They erased his ships to Liberia. They erased his prophecy. Because if black Americans knew Turner's full story, they would ask the most dangerous question. Was he right? And the answer is yes. Jim Crow lasted from 1877 to 1965, 88 years of legal apartheid. Lynching became a public spectacle. Over 4,000 black people murdered by white mobs between 1877 and 1950. Black wealth systematically stolen through land theft, discriminatory laws, and economic exclusion. The wealth gap Turner warned about now sits at a 10-to-1 ratio, white families holding 10 times the wealth of black families. Turner was not crazy. He was a prophet, and they buried him because his truth was too dangerous. But Turner's legacy lived on in ways they could not erase. In the 1920s, Marcus Garvey built the largest black nationalist movement in history, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, directly inspired by Turner's vision. In the 1960s and 70s, the Black Power movement echoed Turner's call for self-determination. In theology departments today, scholars study Turner as a founder of Afrocentric Christianity and Black liberation theology. The question is not whether Turner was right. The question is whether we will finally listen. Turner's expulsion was not an isolated incident. It was the opening move in a systematic campaign of terror that lasted decades. Let me show you the pattern. Let me show you the receipts. Because what happened to Turner in Georgia in 1868 happened over and over and over again. Every single time black people gained political or economic power during and after Reconstruction, white supremacists destroyed it with violence, and the federal government allowed it to happen. November 10th, 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina, 30 years after Turner's expulsion. This city had something white supremacists could not tolerate. Black people were the majority. Black people held political offices. A biracial coalition governed the city, and a black newspaper editor named Alex Manley dared to write an editorial criticizing the lynching of black men. White supremacists organized. Over 2,000 armed white men gathered. They had a plan: overthrow the government, murder the leaders, burn black wealth to the ground. And they executed it in broad daylight. They started with Manly's newspaper office, the Daily Record. They burned it to ashes, destroying every archive, every record, every copy. Then they went hunting. Black residents fled into the swamps and woods as gunfire echoed through the streets. The white mob moved through black neighborhoods, systematically shooting anyone they found. Estimates range from 60 to 300 black residents massacred. The true number was hidden because bodies were dumped in the river and mass graves were never officially documented. Then came the coup. Armed white men marched into City Hall. They forced the mayor and elected officials to resign at gunpoint. They installed their own government. This was the only successful coup d'etat in United States history, and it was against a democratically elected biracial government. Federal troops never came. President William McKinley did nothing. Congress held no hearings. The new white supremacist government stood. And for 70 years, not a single black person held political office in North Carolina. The same month, same pattern, different location. November 1898, Greenwood County, South Carolina. Phoenix election riot. Though riot is the wrong word, it was a massacre. White Democrats were determined to stop black voters at any cost. They attacked polling stations with guns blazing. They burned black homes. They shot black men attempting to vote. 12 black citizens confirmed dead. Hundreds terrorized into fleeing the county. Federal troops did not intervene. The government that had once sent armies to enforce Reconstruction now stood silent while democracy was murdered in the streets. Democrats took total control, and black voting in that county was crushed for generations. Fast forward to November 2nd, 1920, Ocoee, Florida, Election Day. July Perry was a prosperous black farmer, one of the wealthiest men in Ocoee, black or white. He owned land-employed workers and had committed the ultimate crime in the eyes of white supremacy. He encouraged black people to vote. The Ku Klux Klan warned the black community, "Negroes will not vote today." July Perry went to vote anyway. He was turned away at the polls under a phony technicality. White mobs gathered armed and furious. They came for Perry at his home that evening. July Perry defended himself. He fired back, wounding several attackers. But he was one man against a mob. They overpowered him, dragged him into the street, and lynched him. Then they turned their rage on the entire black community. Ocoee burned that night. 25 black-owned homes torched. 2 churches reduced to ash. The school destroyed. Estimates suggest 30 to 50 black residents were killed, though again, exact numbers were hidden. The survivors ran for their lives, abandoning property, abandoning businesses, abandoning everything. For 60 years, no black residents lived in Ocoee. It became a sundown town where black people knew to be gone by dark or face death. The land black families owned was seized, sold for pennies, given to white developers who made fortunes. No compensation, no justice, just theft. One more. September 30th to October 1919. Elaine, Arkansas. Black sharecroppers, tired of being cheated by white landowners, formed a union, the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. Their demand was simple: fair payment for cotton they picked, transparency in accounting, basic economic justice. White planters panicked. If black sharecroppers organized, the entire exploitation system collapsed. They framed it as insurrection, claiming black people were planning to murder white families. It was a lie, but it worked. White mobs formed and federal troops were called in, not to protect black farmers, to slaughter them. For 3 days, white mobs and soldiers hunted black people through the Arkansas Delta. They shot farmers in the fields, burned homes, dragged men from their families, and executed them on the roadside. Estimates range from 100 to 240 black people massacred. Then came the cruel joke of justice. 12 black Union members were arrested, tortured until they confessed to insurrection, tried in a kangaroo court, and sentenced to death. It took years and a Supreme Court appeal to overturn the convictions, a rare moment when the legal system acknowledged its own corruption. The Union was destroyed. Sharecropping exploitation continued for another 40 years, and the massacre was buried in silence. Do you see it now? Wilmington 1898, Phoenix 1898, Elaine 1919, Ocoee 1920. And those are just 4. There were dozens more. Rosewood, Florida 1923, Tulsa, Oklahoma 1921, where an entire 35-block district called Black Wall Street was burned and 300 people were killed. East St. Louis 1917, Atlanta 1906, Memphis 1866. Every single time black people organized, every single time we built political power, economic power, or simply dared to vote, they massacred us. They burned our homes, our churches, our businesses. They murdered our leaders. They stole our land. And the federal government let it happen. This was not mob violence. This was not random chaos. This was policy. This was ethnic cleansing. This was systematic destruction of black political and economic power. And Bishop Henry McNeal Turner saw it coming. That is why in the 1890s, standing in pulpits across the South watching the lynchings rise and Reconstruction die, he told his people the truth they did not want to hear. Leave. They will never let you be free here. They will never let you prosper here. They will destroy you every time you rise. They called him extreme. They called him pessimistic. They called him a separatist. But he was a prophet. And his prophecy came true in blood and fire across the South for 50 years. Hold that thought, because what I am about to show you next is even more sinister. The massacres were one layer, but there was another system running parallel, a system of legal erasure, educational suppression, and media manipulation, designed to make sure you would never know any of this happened. They did not just destroy black power, they destroyed the memory of black power. And that is how they kept you in chains long after the physical violence stopped. After every massacre, they destroyed the evidence. This was not carelessness. This was strategy. Because if there are no records, it never happened. If there are no documents, you cannot prove it. If there are no graves, you cannot count the dead. Let me show you how they did it. Georgia, 1868. After Turner and the 29 black legislators were expelled, something convenient happened. The official records disappeared. State archives claim they were lost, possibly in a fire, possibly misplaced. No one knows for sure. What we do know is this. Without those records, historians cannot definitively prove the details of the expulsion. The dates get fuzzy. The names get forgotten. The speeches vanish. Turner's speech only survived because he was smart enough to publish it himself in newspapers. He knew they would erase him. So he created his own record, printed it, distributed it to black communities across the South. That is the only reason we can read his words today. Am I a man? Have I a soul to save? If he had not done that, his voice would be silent forever. But most black legislators were not bishops with printing presses. Their words are gone. Their stories are gone. Property deeds showing land ownership vanished from county courthouses. Business licenses proving black entrepreneurs existed, missing from city archives. It is almost like someone systematically removed every trace. Wilmington, 1898. After the coup, the new white supremacist government had a problem: physical evidence, so they solved it. The Daily Record Office burned to the ground, every archive destroyed. Property deeds for black-owned homes and businesses disappeared from the courthouse. Death certificates were never filed for the massacred. The official death toll recorded by the city government was 12. 12. Witnesses said 60. Some said 300. Bodies were thrown into the Cape Fear River, where they would never be found. The new government changed zoning laws immediately. Black neighborhoods were declared industrial zones, making rebuilding illegal. Insurance companies conveniently refused to pay claims on destroyed properties, citing riot exclusions in policies. So black families lost their homes, their businesses, their wealth, and had no legal recourse to recover anything. Within 10 years, it was as if Black Wilmington never existed. The land was sold to white developers. New buildings went up, and the official story became this. There was a small riot, a few people died, order was restored. Nothing to see here. Ocoee 1920, same playbook, more efficient execution. After the massacre, the entire black neighborhood was bulldozed. Not just burned, bulldozed. Every foundation, every property marker, every physical trace of black habitation erased from the earth. County records of black landowners vanished from the courthouse. When descendants tried to reclaim property decades later, they could not prove their families ever owned land there because the deeds were gone. July Perry, the wealthy black farmer they lynched, owned valuable property. After his murder, his land was seized and sold at auction. His widow received nothing. His children were run out of town. The white families who bought his land became prosperous. Perry's descendants remain landless to this day. Now let me connect this to something you know. Tulsa, 1921, Black Wall Street. 35 city blocks, over 1,000 black-owned homes, businesses, churches, schools. Burned in 16 hours, 300 people killed. After the massacre, the city changed fire codes, making it illegal for black residents to rebuild without expensive permits most could not afford. Insurance companies refused every single claim. Property records were altered or destroyed. Then the city did something truly evil. They built a highway right through the Greenwood district, covering the mass graves, erasing the neighborhood boundaries, making archaeological recovery nearly impossible. For 75 years, the Tulsa Race Massacre was not in Oklahoma textbooks. 3 generations of children grew up not knowing it happened. This is the pattern. Physical destruction, then documentary destruction, then legal barriers to rebuilding, then silence. Repeat it enough times, and entire communities vanish from history. But physical destruction was just the first weapon. The second weapon was law itself. After Reconstruction collapsed, white Democrats across the South passed laws to make black disenfranchisement legal. Not just acceptable, legal, stamped, approved, constitutional. Jim Crow laws rolled out like a plague from 1877 through the 1890s. Poll taxes made voting cost money, and most black Southerners were sharecroppers living in debt. If you could not pay $2, which might be a week's wages, you could not vote. Literacy tests required potential voters to answer impossible questions. How many bubbles in a bar of soap? How many jelly beans in this jar? Recite the entire Constitution from memory. And white registrars had total discretion to pass or fail anyone. Grandfather clauses said you could only vote if your grandfather voted. Since black people's grandfathers were enslaved and could not vote, this eliminated almost every black voter in one sentence. But it gets worse. Black codes turned everyday life into a crime. Vagrancy laws made it illegal to be unemployed. If you were a black man without a job, police arrested you, a judge convicted you in minutes, and you were sold into convict leasing. Slavery continued under a new name. Corporations leased convicts from the state, worked them in coal mines, turpentine camps, chain gangs. Thousands died. No one cared, because legally they were criminals. The Supreme Court endorsed all of it. Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 made separate but equal the law of the land. Segregation was constitutional. The federal government, which had sent troops to enforce Reconstruction, now sent nothing. The Compromise of 1877 pulled those troops out in exchange for Rutherford B. Hayes winning the presidency. Black Southerners were sold out for political power. Georgia, after expelling Turner and the other black legislators, passed a law explicitly stating only whites were eligible to hold office. That law stood until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 86 years of legal exclusion from political power. Think about what that means. From 1868 to 1964, black Georgians could not govern themselves, could not write laws, could not sit on juries in many counties, could not hold white people accountable through the legal system. Every law, every policy, every decision was made by white men who had a vested interest in keeping black people poor, powerless, and silent. This was not accident. This was architecture, a legal structure built deliberately to maintain white supremacy while appearing legitimate. And it worked for nearly a century. Now here is where it gets truly insidious. Physical destruction erases the present. Legal suppression controls the future. But educational erasure erases the past. And if you control the past, you control identity itself. Southern school boards, controlled entirely by white segregationists, decided what children learned, and they made sure black history was either erased or inverted. Textbooks taught that Reconstruction was a disaster, a period of corrupt Negro rule, where illiterate former slaves destroyed state governments. They taught that the Ku Klux Klan were heroes protecting white women from black savagery. Turner's expulsion from the Georgia Legislature, not mentioned. The Wilmington coup, called a race riot blaming black aggression. Ocoee, not in Florida textbooks until the 1990s. Tulsa removed from Oklahoma curriculum for 75 years. Rosewood not taught in schools until survivors sued the state in the 1990s. Instead, children learned the lost cause mythology. The Civil War was not about slavery, but states' rights. Slavery was a benevolent institution where happy enslaved people were cared for by kind masters. Reconstruction failed because black people were not ready for freedom. Segregation was natural, necessary, even biblical. In 1915, a film called Birth of a Nation was released. It portrayed the Ku Klux Klan as heroic defenders of white civilization and black legislators during Reconstruction as drunken rapists. President Woodrow Wilson screened it in the White House and praised it. The film was used as a recruitment tool for the Klan, and membership exploded to 4 million by the 1920s. This was the education white children received, and black children. In underfunded, segregated schools with hand-me-down textbooks, they learned a version of history designed to make them ashamed of their ancestors. Slavery was unfortunate, but unavoidable. Black leaders were mostly accommodationists, like Booker T. Washington, who told black people to accept segregation and work hard. Radicals like Turner were erased entirely. An entire generation grew up not knowing their own history, not knowing their ancestors were elected officials, business owners, landowners, war heroes, not knowing about the massacres, not knowing about the stolen wealth. And if you do not know your history, you cannot understand your present. You cannot explain why your family is poor when you work 3 jobs. You cannot explain why your neighborhood has no grocery stores. You cannot explain the wealth gap because you do not know about the theft. That is the goal. Make you forget. Make you think your struggle is your fault. Make you believe the lie that if you just work harder, follow the rules, stay quiet, you will prosper. Meanwhile, the system designed to keep you poor continues humming along invisible, unquestioned. Then came the media, the final weapon. White newspapers controlled the narrative completely. When massacres happened, they did not report massacres. They reported riots implying both sides were equally violent. Wilmington in 1898 was called the Wilmington Race Riot, suggesting black people rioted. Elaine in 1919 was the Elaine Race Riot, not the Elaine Massacre. Language matters. Riots sound chaotic, uncontrolled, mutual. Massacres sound like what they were. One-sided slaughter. White newspapers minimized death tolls to make atrocities seem smaller. Wilmington officially 12 dead, when the real number was 60 to 300. Elaine officially 25 black people, when it was over 200. Tulsa officially 36, when witnesses said 300. By lowering the numbers, they lowered the outrage. They demonized black leaders to justify violence. Turner was called a dangerous radical and blasphemer for saying God is a Negro. Alex Manley, the Wilmington newspaper editor, was called a brute for writing an editorial. July Perry was labeled an agitator for encouraging black people to vote. The message was clear. If you speak up, you are the problem. If you resist, you deserve what happens. White newspapers also silenced black voices directly. They burned black newspaper offices like the Daily Record in Wilmington. They arrested black editors on fabricated charges. They pressured advertisers to pull support from black publications, choking them financially. Turner fought back by founding his own papers, The Voice of Missions in 1893 and The Voice of the People in 1901. He used them to publish the truth about lynchings, massacres, Jim Crow, and the betrayal of Reconstruction. But Turner's papers had limited circulation. White newspapers had monopolies reaching millions. So the white narrative dominated. For generations, if you read the news, you read lies. And if you believed the lies, you blamed black people for their own oppression. This system, physical destruction, plus legal suppression, plus educational erasure, plus media manipulation, worked for over a century. It kept black Americans from knowing their own power. It kept white Americans from knowing their own complicity. And it kept the wealth stolen during this period in white hands, compounding generation after generation, creating the gap we see today. Which brings us to right now, because everything I just told you is not past tense, it is present tense. The theft continues, the suppression continues, the erasure continues, just with new names. Let me show you the numbers first, then I will show you the connection. Median white household wealth today is $188,000. Median black household wealth is $24,000. White families have 10 times more wealth than black families. Even when you control for education, white college graduates have 7 times more wealth than black college graduates. They want you to believe this is because black people do not work hard enough. They want you to believe it is cultural, a failure of values, a lack of responsibility. That is a lie. Let me show you why. If Turner had not been expelled from the Georgia Legislature in 1868, black legislators could have passed land redistribution. The federal government promised 40 acres and a mule to every freed family. 4 million formerly enslaved people times 40 acres equals 160 million acres. That promise was broken. If it had been kept, black families today would own land worth trillions of dollars. Generational wealth compounding for 157 years. If the Wilmington government had not been overthrown in 1898, black political power in North Carolina would have continued. Black-owned businesses would have thrived. Black families would have accumulated wealth through property ownership, business profits, political influence. Instead, it was all destroyed in one day, and 70 years passed before another black person held office there. If Ocoee had not been burned in 1920, those 25 black-owned properties worth $500,000 in 1920 would be worth over $7 million today. July Perry's farmland prime Florida real estate would be worth tens of millions. Instead, his descendants have nothing. The white families who stole that land are wealthy. If Jim Crow had not stolen 13 million acres of black-owned farmland between 1910 and 1997, black families would own land worth over $100 billion. But through legal tricks, violence, discriminatory lending, and outright fraud, that land was taken. 90% of black-owned agricultural land vanished in less than a century. This is not ancient history. Your grandmother lived this. Your father lived this. If your family is from the South, this happened to your ancestors. The wealth gap is not because black people do not work hard. It is because they stole everything we built. Every single time. Now let me tell you why reparations are not charity. They are debt repayment. When someone says slavery was long ago, get over it, here is what you tell them. Turner was expelled in 1868, 157 years ago. Ocoee burned in 1920, 105 years ago. Jim Crow ended in 1965, 60 years ago. Redlining, the federal policy that denied black families mortgages and kept them out of wealth-building neighborhoods, ended in 1968, 57 years ago. This is not ancient. This is within living memory. There are people alive today whose parents were sharecroppers under Jim Crow. There are people alive today whose grandparents were born enslaved. The theft is recent. The theft is ongoing. Economists have calculated what is owed. Between $10 and $12 trillion. That accounts for stolen labor during slavery. The broken promise of 40 acres, stolen land during Jim Crow, destroyed property in massacres like Tulsa and Wilmington, and Ocoee, lost wages due to segregation, wealth denied through redlining and discriminatory lending, and the compounding interest on all of it over generations. $12 trillion. That is not a gift. That is what is owed. If someone stole your grandmother's house, you would demand it back. If someone murdered your grandfather and took his farm, you would demand compensation. Why is it different when the victims are black? Turner saw this coming in the 1890s. He said they will never pay us what they owe. 130 years later, he is still right. But that does not mean we stop demanding it. That means we fight harder. Now let me show you how history is repeating right now, today, in your lifetime. Gentrification is modern land theft. Just like Wilmington, just like Ocoee, just like Tulsa, they are forcing black people out and taking the land. Harlem, Brooklyn, Oakland, Atlanta, historically black neighborhoods are being redeveloped. That is the word they use, redeveloped. It means black families priced out, evicted, displaced. Property taxes skyrocket when white people move in. Black families who have owned homes for generations suddenly cannot afford the taxes. They lose their homes. White developers buy the properties cheap at auction and resell them for 10 times the price. It is the same pattern Turner witnessed in the 1890s. Legal theft. Mass incarceration is modern slavery. Just like the black codes and vagrancy laws that arrested black people for being unemployed, the modern criminal justice system targets black communities with over-policing, harsh sentencing, and mandatory minimums. 1 in 3 black men will be imprisoned in their lifetime. In prison, they work for 25 cents an hour, making products for corporations. Slavery, by another name. Turner warned in the 1890s that they would find new ways to enslave us. He was right. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except as punishment for crime. That exception is the loophole. Criminalize black existence, then legally enslave us again. Police brutality is the modern Ku Klux Klan. White mobs used to massacre black voters in places like Ocoee with no consequences. Today, police kill unarmed black people with no consequences. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, modern lynchings. Police unions protect killer cops, just like the Klan was never prosecuted. The federal government still fails to intervene, just like 1868, just like 1898, just like 1920. Voter suppression is modern Jim Crow. Closing polling stations in black neighborhoods, requiring voter ID laws that disproportionately affect black voters, purging voter rolls. Exact same tactics as the 1890s, just using different language. They are still trying to stop us from voting, because they know if we vote in full force, we have power. History does not repeat, it rhymes. And Turner's prophecy echoes through time. America will never treat you equal. You will fight the same fight generation after generation until you demand what is owed and take back what was stolen. But here is what they did not count on. Here is what breaks their system. You, knowing the truth, understanding your history, recognizing your power. Let me tell you who you really are. You are not a victim. You are a survivor. Your ancestors survived the Middle Passage. 2 million Africans died on those ships. Yours lived. Your ancestors survived slavery. 400 years of genocide, rape, family separation, torture. Yours survived. Your ancestors survived the Reconstruction betrayal. Expelled from legislatures, massacred in the streets, lynched by mobs. Yours survived. Your ancestors survived Jim Crow. 90 years of legal terrorism. Yours survived. You are a descendant of the strongest people on earth. You carry warrior DNA. That strength is not metaphor. It is genetic memory, spiritual inheritance, divine selection. Now let me reframe something they taught you to be ashamed of. Your poverty. You were taught that poverty means failure, that if you are struggling financially, you did something wrong. You did not work hard enough. You made bad choices. That is a lie designed to break your spirit. Your poverty is not your fault. Your poverty is stolen wealth. If Turner had not been expelled, your family would own land. If Wilmington had not been burned, your family would be millionaires. If Jim Crow had not stolen black farms, your family would have generational wealth. You are not poor because you failed. You are poor because they robbed you. Every struggle you face is not weakness, it is warfare. You are fighting a 400-year war. And the fact that you are still here, still standing, still building, still fighting, that is victory. That is strength they cannot comprehend. Turner was expelled from the Georgia Legislature, but he did not stop. He built the AME Church into a powerhouse. He ordained the first woman deacon. He organized ships to Africa. He founded newspapers. He inspired millions. He was called extreme, dangerous, blasphemous. But he stood firm. That strength is in you. Let me tell you about your inheritance. Henry McNeal Turner was born into poverty in 1834. His father died young. He was denied education by law. But he taught himself to read, taught himself theology, taught himself law. He became a bishop, a legislator, a newspaper publisher, an international leader. He did not beg white people for permission. He took his power. When the entire nation called him blasphemer for saying God is a Negro, he stood firm. When they called him a traitor for preaching back to Africa, he stood firm. When 500 people sailed to Liberia and some failed and returned, he did not give up. He kept preaching, kept writing, kept organizing until his last breath. That is your legacy. Not failure, not victimhood. Relentless resistance, unbreakable spirit, divine purpose. Think about your great-great-grandfather who voted in 1868 despite Klan threats. Warrior. Your great-grandmother who kept the family together during Jim Crow. Warrior. Your grandfather who marched for civil rights. Warrior. Your mother who raised you despite systemic racism. Warrior. You fighting today for justice, for reparations, for truth. Warrior. This is an unbroken chain of resistance stretching back 400 years. Turner was a link in that chain. You are a link in that chain. And the chain does not break. You are not weak. You are an heir to profits. You are not poor. You are dispossessed royalty. You are not struggling. You are fighting a war your ancestors started, and you are going to finish it. Now let me tell you why God preserved you. Why did God bring your ancestors through the Middle Passage when 2 million died? Why did God keep them alive through slavery when thousands were worked to death? Why did God protect them through Reconstruction massacres when hundreds were lynched? Why did God sustain them through Jim Crow when the system tried to crush them? Why did God bring them through the civil rights struggle when dogs and fire hoses and assassins tried to stop them? Why did God bring you here to this moment, to this video right now? Because you have a mission. Your mission is revelation. Reveal the truth they buried. Speak the names they erased. Henry McNeal Turner, Alex Manley, July Perry, Marcus Garvey, Ida B. Wells. Tell the stories they hid. The Georgia expulsion, the Wilmington coup, the Ocoee massacre, the Tulsa burning. Make them hear it. Make them remember. Your mission is justice. Demand reparations not as charity, but as debt owed. Demand the land back what they stole from Turner, from Wilmington, from Ocoee, from your ancestors. Demand accountability for the massacres, for Jim Crow, for mass incarceration, for police brutality. Do not ask. Demand. Your mission is restoration. Restore Turner's name to history books, so every child knows the bishop who said God is a Negro. Restore black wealth through reparations and economic self-sufficiency. Restore black power through political organizing, community building, and refusal to be silent. Turner's prophetic voice speaks to you across 157 years. He said, "I will go through all the land and advise my race." He said, "God is a Negro, reclaim your dignity." He said, "Build your own, do not wait for white approval." God used Turner as a prophet in the 1800s. God is using you as a prophet now. This video found you for a reason. You are called. You are chosen. You are anointed. Walk in that power. Before we finish, I need you to do something right now. If this truth shook you, if this video opened your eyes, if you feel the weight of what you just learned, type truth in the comments. If you never learned this in school, if they erased this from your education, type erased. Hit that like button, because YouTube needs to know we want more of this truth, not less. And share this video. Share it with your children so they grow up knowing who Turner was. Share it with your family, so the next time someone says, "Get over slavery," they have the facts. Share it with your church, because this is spiritual warfare as much as historical education. Every share is an act of resistance. Every comment is a declaration that we will not forget. This is not just one story. Bishop Henry McNeal Turner is one of hundreds of black heroes they erased from history. On this channel, we are exposing all of them. Robert F. Williams, Ida B. Wells, Paul Robeson, Queen Mother Moore. We are bringing them back from the grave, speaking their names, telling their stories. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications, because every week we are dropping another stolen story, another erased hero, another piece of your inheritance. And here is what I need you to do today, not tomorrow, today. 1. Tell your children this story. Sit them down tonight and tell them about Henry McNeal Turner, the bishop who said God is a Negro and told his people to never stop fighting. Do not let them grow up not knowing. 2. Join the reparations movement. Look up H.R. 40, the bill in Congress, to study reparations. Call your representatives. Demand they support it. This is not radical. This is justice. 3. Support black-owned businesses. Build economic self-sufficiency like Turner taught. Every dollar you spend in the black community is a brick in the wall of our economic power. 4. Attend town halls on wealth inequality. Show up to city council meetings. Demand accountability. Demand policies that address the theft. Your voice matters. Use it. This is not just history. This is your inheritance. This is your fight. Turner did not die so you could stay silent. He died so you could rise up and demand justice. So let us pray and then let us act. Father God, we come before you with heavy hearts and awakened minds. We thank you for preserving this truth through 157 years of erasure. We thank you for Bishop Henry McNeal Turner, your prophet, your warrior, your servant. We thank you for his courage when he stood before the Georgia Legislature and declared, "I am a man." We lift up the names they tried to erase. Henry McNeal Turner, expelled 1868. Alex Manley, silenced in Wilmington, 1898. July Perry, lynched in Ocoee, 1920. The 29 black legislators stolen from power. The 500 immigrants who sailed to Liberia seeking freedom. The millions who suffered Jim Crow because Reconstruction was betrayed. We honor their memory. We carry their legacy. We will not let them be forgotten again. Lord, we pray for justice. Justice for the stolen land, 13 million acres taken from black farmers. Justice for the massacres, Wilmington, Ocoee, Elaine, Tulsa, Rosewood. Justice for the wealth stolen, $12 trillion owed to black descendants. We pray for restoration. Restore Turner's name to history books. Restore wealth through reparations. Restore power through economic self-determination. We pray for awakening. Awaken your people to the truth. Give us courage like Turner had. Give us voices that cannot be silenced. Bless those who seek truth. Strengthen those who resist erasure. Vindicate the memory of our ancestors. And give us the courage to demand what is ours. In the name of Jesus, who came to set the captives free. In the name of the God who Turner declared is Negro. We claim our inheritance. We demand our justice. We walk in freedom. Amen. Bishop Henry McNeal Turner said in 1868, "There is a just God in heaven, whose all-seeing eye beholds the oppressor and the oppressed. That God is watching now. Walk in truth. Demand justice. Build wealth. Teach your children. You are free." This is Dark History Stories. Until next time, remember, Turner demand reparations, reclaim your inheritance.